Hey everybody, welcome back to the show, Confessions of a Creative Director, the original podcast made by a creative director for aspiring creative directors, for veteran creative directors, for creatives of all types looking to stay ahead of the game, looking to learn from other creatives in the business about how they see the world, how they operate in the world, and really learn how to become a kick-ass creative director, which is the title of my book. How convenient. What's the big idea? An indispensable guide to becoming a kick-ass creative director. My first book. It's out now. Look, listen, it's January. So if you're an aspiring creative who's looking to make a big jump this year into the creative director role, I highly recommend that you pick up this book. It's chock full of all the information that you're going to need. It's a high-level guide. It's a short read, but it's chock full of really great information that you're going to need to prepare for the role. And it's really going to actually, first and foremost, set you up to have a great conversation with your boss about it. You're going to learn everything from overcoming imposter syndrome to what the role is really about, to tips and techniques on how to, better ideate, from working with the different disciplines within the organization to hiring folks. Really, everything that you need to become a kick-ass creative director is in this book. So pick it up wherever you buy books. Available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and on my website. So check that out. And on today's show, I have a kick-ass creative director, of course, Mike Potter from Encore. Now, Mike's been around the block. He's worked for a ton of great agencies and brands. He's now at Encore, and he was really there at the wild, wild west, the beginning of the interwebs. He's going to talk about building websites for brands in the very, very early stages, and about how he's always been that guy that's been pushing emerging technologies and emerging disciplines, and how he's really passionate about that. He wants to continue to go beyond the TV spot and really help brands create communities. So we're going to talk about all of that. He's also going to give you a great tip about hitting the mascot, and he's going to remind us about all the fun of office hijinks in the convention at the very, very end. So I guess you just have to stay tuned, listen to the whole show. So without further ado, let's get into it with Mike Potter.
Hey, Mike, how's it going?
Hey, Jaime, how you doing? I'm good.
I'm good. We're recording this the week right before the break, so it'll air in the new year. So I hope you're kind of getting ready to shut down a little bit and take a little rest. Is that accurate, or are you going to be working through the break?
Yeah, doing a little work through the break. Not a complete, not a total time off, but picking my points, picking my places to jump back in and jump out.
Excellent. And I'm gonna put you on the spot here. Any big New Year's resolutions coming to mind? Is there something that you want to be focusing on for next year, which will be now as this airs? It'll be
Exactly
2023, which is so crazy to me. But do you have any big plans?
Well, from a professional standpoint, I do, and as you know, my colleague Aaron Miller, both of us at our current shop, which is Encore, it's really about breaking through, and we're trying to bring this group really into a more national prominence from a creative standpoint, from the ability, from our getting some projects that really, get out there and make people take notice and, just make a big splash. And that's really what my goal will be for 2023. And Aaron's too, we're all really psyched about creating something new that the industry hasn't seen yet.
That's cool. And as I was going, and Aaron Miller, just for the folks listening, I've had on my show as well. It's a great episode. You want to check that out. I would say, as I was doing my research here on you, that's kind of been a hallmark of your career in a sense, right? You seem to always be wanting to do something different, wanting to break through and kind of break down some silos and things like that. So why don't you kind of give us a brief overview of sort of your career trajectory, which has been pretty extensive, lots of different agencies, lots of different brands. Why don't you give us give the audience a little overview of what you've done?
Well, sure. So, and as I was telling you earlier, I sort of started my career by accident almost. I was getting an MBA degree way back in the day, and I was in a student computer lab, and there was this kid using this thing next to me, and I asked him what it was, and he said it was this thing called Mosaic, and he was looking at the quote unquote World Wide Web, and I had no idea what he was talking about, and I just became fascinated with it, and I sort of, I guess I was prescient in that I saw that it was going to do something. It was going to mean something in society, and it was going to change things. Obviously, I didn't see how much, or I would have invested in a lot more tech companies when I had the chance.
Yeah.
But I did think it was going to be important, and so I ended up wanting to get a job in advertising when I was finished with the MBA. In that I didn't see any big corporations or any kind of cool marketing job that was going to give me the opportunity at that point to do anything with the internet. So that's going to start to give you an idea how long ago this was. But I had learned started teaching myself how to make websites, started learning graphics packages. And so I made a website for myself, and I was kind of posting my POVs on there about the internet, and I was, sending it out to different agencies, and somebody from Young and Rubicam saw it, and they made me I was the fourth person hired for what they were calling their new technologies group. And I started working there as like back then it was 4 people handling essentially all of the entire Young and Rubicam footprint globally for like internet questions, and every client would, what's this internet thing? And so, if it was in Colombia or wherever, it would basically percolate up to us, and then one of us would have to like go and deal with it. But it was this great experience because I got to do everything. Like I was a media person, I was an account person, I was like actually hand coding HTML websites, I was doing graphics, I was doing the copy. And so it was fantastic. It was the Wild West sort of. And so I did that for like about 2 years, and then they started, as these things go, they start formalizing it, and now you have to have a job title. And so I wanted to stay on the creative side, and I wanted to focus on copy and sort of as a creative director. So I became an associate creative director and I built the first websites for Dr. Pepper and 7-Up.
Wow.
I did the first interfaces for the Postal Service when they were doing their first e-commerce sites. So some really cool stuff. And sort of to get to your sort of the way you led into this, it was from the beginning always Young and Rubicam was a big brand agency, and so it was always about the TV spot. But the clients were sort of like, well, but this internet thing is kind of interesting. And so they'd bring us in as this like a dog and pony show, sort of look at these cool like websites, and here's what a banner ad looks like. And I was always trying to, and that was always frustrating to me because we were always the sort of add-on, and I was always really trying to push doing more, and that there could be greater collaboration and integration between what was on the TV spot and what was happening on the web. And obviously the technologies were much more primitive back then, so you couldn't do as integrated, let's say, but there was still no reason why a campaign couldn't be more integrated and sort of like trickle down at least into what was happening on the internet. And many years into my career, we started putting the URL on the tagging it at the end of the TV spot, and that was a big news, and that's integration. And so it's always been really trying to just I love the technology, and I love the idea of like that it's another form of creativity, and seeing how this technology can be used in new ways to engage a consumer, engage your audience. And so that's always been really fascinating to me, that's sort of another avenue of creativity. These brand creatives, they just had the TV spot, and that was it, or they had the print ad, and that was it. But like we had art, copy, and technology, and that it was a way to sort of really integrate into somebody's life and become immersive. And so it's just always, I feel like through my career, I've been always trying to push that and move people in that direction. And so,
Yeah.
sometimes it's super fun and sometimes it's super frustrating.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that here in a second, because it's an interesting topic, and and I want to see kind of how your thoughts have evolved on that. So, given that you have sort of a unique way into this world, how would you describe the role of a creative director, or how have you personally experienced the role of a creative director?
Well, I had one of my first bosses who was a creative director, and he had come into the role himself through less than traditional channels, and he basically explained to me that his role was problem solver, and he used
Mm,
to, I heard him say to people, art graphic designers or art directors who came in, that if you want to do what you want to do, be an artist, like express your creativity that way, express just what you want and make a statement and put it out in the world. But if you're being a creative on a professional basis, it's about using creativity to solve a problem. And that's how
yeah,
I've always looked at it ever since then, because I really like that just that mindset of being a problem
yeah,
solver, that when you look at things as if they're a problem and you're trying to figure out a way to solve something and get to the best possible solution for your client, it just is a great way to frame everything. And I think one of the things that always drove me nuts is when account people or the clients sort of would write off the creatives as just sort of goofs who, sit around reading comic books and, riding their little like scooters or something. That, I think in a way that the creatives, creative problem solving is a really powerful tool, and it needs to be taken seriously. And I think, and I love the strategic part of the job as well. And I'm
yeah.
always really grounded in a strategy, and I'll push back on the strategist if I don't think that they're on the right track. And because I think it really needs to be an integrated process. It just can't be, here's a silo where we create
Right.
strategy and we pop it out and now we give it to you in the creatives silo. And um, so yeah, I would say, like, I look at it as being a problem solver, and I just think that's a wonderful challenge. And it's, because who doesn't need to solve problems in some part of their life, professional or personal?
Yeah.
And I just think it's a great way to look at things.
Yeah, and I think I'm with you, and I think that traditionally, right, it's been seen as kind of like um, you can solve problems with creativity, right? So I love this idea that you're sort of pushing back, or can push back on on the strategy when it comes through, and maybe it's not, you're seeing it in a different way, right? As opposed to just taking the brief and accepting it wholesale, because you're seeing it from a bigger from a different lens, right? So with that in mind, what are some parts of your process, your creative process? Are there certain things, certain tools, certain techniques or things that you like to implement? Let's say when you're coming up, you've just gotten a new brief for a new client. Are there certain things that you like to do?
Um, like a long time ago, and this was even before I really got into advertising, my father, who uh, is a passed the bar exam and has his law degree. It ended up, long story, that he never ended up practicing law, but he did give me a book that one of his law professors once gave him. It's a little book. Can't remember. I know I have it somewhere, but it's called How to Solve It. And it was just
Yeah,
this little thin book. Um, I'll have to dig up the name and the title and email it to you later. But
yeah,
it's a great little treatise on how to, essentially paring the problem down to its like just base, like getting rid of all the superfluous stuff surrounding, and what at the very core is what you're trying to solve. And so I always like to, um, a lot of times strategic briefs, I sometimes feel can be really overburdened or over laden with a lot of fluff. And
Yeah.
I think that there's, everybody wants to show their worth. So sometimes these briefs end up being a little bit more detailed than they need to
Then
be.
they
And I
need to
think that
be. Yeah.
sometimes, yeah, and I think that, but I think that's, I'm not trying to, I know I don't want any of my strategist friends to get angry about this, but I think we all do it. I know I do it in my own, do it too, but everybody likes to hear themselves talk and everybody likes to express their opinion. And that's like really one of the biggest disciplines you have to have in life is paring it down to its essence.
Yeah.
Like less is always, always, always more. And so again, with a brief, just really, so just for myself, getting it to the very bare minimum of what is really the core problem. And then you can work with your team to sort of, take that, talk through the brief with them, and then really guide them on like, here's the very core of what we're trying to do. I used to be at Organic, which was part of BBDO, and we sat in the BBDO office in New York, and we would work on AT&T and DirecTV there. And there was a strategist there, God, I wish I could remember his name, who once gave us a 3-line brief. It was fantastic, and I've loved it ever since. And it was just the 3 lines were
Get to buy. Is it the get to buy?
Yeah, to buy, and there's another one I can't think of it, but it's just 3 lines, and it was so. And I've started to use that as well as like a way to, okay, here's your big brief, but like at the end of the day, here's what you're trying to do.
Yeah,
and I think that really helps.
Absolutely,
especially for young creatives who like get overwhelmed with too much information. Sometimes, you got to just really show them exactly what is important and what's not, and this is what you're trying to do.
Yeah, especially because, if they're the ones that are doing the bulk of, not the bulk, but they're doing a lot of the work, right? And they may be involved in several other projects. It's sort of the burden is on the creative director to take in all that information that you just talked about, right? Whether it's a 20-page brief and then, synthesizing that down to the single-minded proposition or the get to buy statement or whatever. But you want to make it as easy for them because they have other things, that they have to worry about. So I love that.
Exactly.
I love that you're kind of taking on that burden and helping them really get it concise. Yeah. What else? Is there anything else that you do? Especially, I'm curious because
I usually try to run things by my boss here, so he's always right here.
He's showing that for those of you just
literally throughout the day podcast. He sits right there, so and he keeps me on track.
What's his what's his
his name is Ra.
Okay, Ra. So you have to run everything by Ra. I love it. Exactly. But is there anything else? So given that you're that you not a big fan of silos, like to kind of keep everybody connected, is there anything else as part of your process?
I love collaborating. I think that's, extremely important. I think getting, as a varied background, nice eclectic mix of people with different backgrounds. I think that's always important. And I always love to push people to, and after having just said, getting down to the base of the problem and really narrowing it down, I think it's also, if you ever saw the movie Bull Durham, the Tim Robbins character is finally got out of his head and he's reaching his talent and he's just pitching phenomenally. And Kevin Costner comes out and tells him to hit the mascot, and he's like, just do it, just hit the mascot. And and he does, and it kind of calms him down again. And I think that I like to also, give me, follow that track that I've given you, but also just throw one out there, like whatever you think. I mean, disregard what the strategy is. Disregard just what if you could solve the problem, how would you do it?
Okay.
And I think that's like, and I like to do that just to again get people break out of the like, okay, well, here's what I have to think because I'm being told to think this way. But if it was up to me, and sometimes you find little nuggets in those. If I was doing it, that they might not have thought actually fit into what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
But, you can pull them out and suddenly that becomes a great idea. And that's great because then they're passionate about it because it's their thought and not what people were telling them to like kind of work around.
Yeah, I love that. I'll call that the hit the mascot technique. I
Yeah,
like that.
hit the
I'm gonna
mascot,
steal
exactly.
that. All right, so we've talked about this on our pre-call and just in general. You've always been again coming in with new technology, right? And when you were talking about being on the cutting edge of developing websites and user interfaces and things like that, to sort of coming in and really wanting to talk about experiences and what that means. You've always sort of been, if I'm thinking about this correctly, on the outside looking in, right? You're coming into these agencies and you're trying to
Sometimes feels that
show,
way, yes.
yeah, trying to show the
Yeah.
value. So what, tell me about that whole, I'll call it a struggle because I've experienced it as well, being, spending a lot of time talking about experiential, but kind of paint the picture of that whole struggle and what that's been like and sort of what your mission is these days in regards to that.
Sure. Yeah, I guess I did touch on this a little in the beginning about sort of sometimes the fun challenge and sometimes the frustrating challenge of always sort of being like the outside, the component that's like outside the big component. So,
Right.
working, just referring back to when I was at Organic and we were sitting with BBDO working on AT&T and DirecTV, and you know that was an environment that was very focused on the big TV campaign. Like that
Right.
is like that the anthem spot, and then everything sort of boils down from that. But it's like, here's your anthem spot, here's your manifesto, and then everything that we did sort of on a digital new media kind of social level was in reinforcing that story that was being presented in television. And so and there were just, many instances that, you kind of start to wonder, like, well, why are we doing it this way? And it, it just always led to a lot of frustration, especially because, like, we would go in and pitch, well, we'll do a series of social videos that, are using your spokespeople. We can, we'll crank out like, 20 of them, and for like half the cost that that the agency, the brand agency people were saying, like one of their 30-second spots was going to be, twice what we're asking just to do these 20 little tiny spots, like in between their takes of their 30-second or something. So
Right.
it was always like frustrating. I was like, we're getting so much more, sort of bang for the buck here. Like, why are we basing everything on this? And so, and it's just always been frustrating from that standpoint of like
Sure.
feeling like you have to not only sell the client but the rest of the agency about why this is a great idea. And I think like one of the
Right.
best examples, and this is really what led to me getting into events and experiential, was that I was working on a brand, American Family Insurance, and BBDO had that, and they were selling them this big brand campaign, and we were coming in with sort of supporting, big digital initiative kind of things, and they were generally supposed to be in support of what BBDO was doing.
Mm-hmm.
But we came up with an idea for a sort of branded event that American Family had these great brand ambassador relationships. So they had John Legend and J.J. Watt and T.J. Watt and Richard Sherman and Kathy Ireland and a whole bunch of people. And so we created this tour that went to 5 different cities, and at each stop there was a different one of these different big celebrities came in, and all of the local agents would invite clients to come in, and they would work with a nonprofit in the city to do something. So like in Madison, Wisconsin, J.J. Watt and T.J. Watt and Derek Watt came, and we worked with we packed all these boxes of food staples at a homeless shelter
Yeah.
or a food kitchen. And in Seattle, we worked with Richard Sherman and Bobby Wagner of the Seahawks to pack like 3,000 backpacks full of hygiene essentials for a homeless organization. And so in the feedback that we got from these like events where people came and devoted, 5 hours of their time and got to meet these celebrities, but also just do something good for the community. The feedback we got was amazing. I've never gotten feedback like this for any work I've ever done, where I had agents who were forwarding me emails that said, it was one of their clients said, I was about to leave American Family because I thought your rates are too high, but then I said I'd wait until I got to come meet JJ Watt. And now that I see what my money is, like my premiums, like I'm supporting a company that believes in this, I'm staying with you. Like,
That's
just
cool.
amazing stuff like that, like directly impacted. And meanwhile, I'm off doing like social videos for AT&T and DirecTV. And it's just, we do a really great video and we post it and then we go look at the comments and it's like, my coverage sucks. Why can't I get a signal? You overcharged me, yada,
Right.
yada. It's just like pages and pages of this. Like it was just, we're shouting out into the ether. Nobody's listening, shouting into the abyss. Meanwhile, like when we're on the ground, giving people some reason to be involved and to believe in something, suddenly it's just cutting through all that clutter that surrounds them that you get on social
Right.
media or anywhere else in your life. And so
No, I think you're right on, because I think the question is, how do we, convince, to your point, even sometimes our own agencies and the client, that the experiences and the experiential and those things can be the lead, right? And can and should be the lead, right? So in your previous models, you talk about how it's always been the big TV spot that leads, right? And you kind of like, you're lucky to get in there in between takes and record a little bit or do some other
yeah.
little thing, right? But and I think some brands are already doing it, when you can lead with that experience and then everything else kind of works around it. That can be super powerful. And talk about breaking through the clutter, right? When you can see, so maybe I'm over analyzing it here or overthinking it, but it's like if you could see a TV spot that was made from a brand experience, that's totally different, right? Because you see people experiencing the brand in a different way,
Exactly.
and you created the commercial around that, right? As opposed to the other way around. And I think that's, something that I'm passionate about as well. And it's, if I'm being honest, it's still a struggle. And I think that's where, brands want to break through and they want to win a Cannes Lion and all that stuff. And I'm like, guess what? I don't think it's going to happen just with a TV spot. It's going to have to be something much bigger and much more meaningful than that.
Exactly. And that's one of the things, and I, having been in advertising as long as I have and working at the brand agency sort of a lot of the time, from sort of coming in from the new technology, aspect. So, first it was websites, then rich media, then social media, then, mobile and AR, whatever it is now. There's always been this fear in agencies with all, like with the technology that, what are we going to do? Like, what is it putting us out of business? And, I think to a certain extent that the fears have been well founded to a lot of these agencies. And you see them now by just everything they're doing, like nobody really knows exactly what an agency is doing anymore, especially like the really traditional agencies. If you see some of the work that goes to Cannes these days, it's all about like, can we, what kind of earned media stunt can we pull? And I would argue that those big, media exposure stunts are not money well spent. That like, but what I think the technology all along has done is it's given people more access to their passions and to each other. So what I think, the market really now comes down to, it's not so much about consumers in my mind, but it's about communities. and communities forming around whether it's a product or some kind of content series or whatever their passion is. A lot of the times that you need, I feel like the great thing about Experiential is we're speaking to communities now. You're giving them something to experience, and that's what they want.
Yeah.
And a TV spot just isn't feeding that anymore. I mean, people, unless you're watching live sports, I don't know that TV is reaching anyone really. And even on live sports, I see spots all the time when I'm watching football. They're funny spots, but I can't imagine them changing my mind on anything. I already have the things I like and the things I don't like. But what does affect me is like when something that I experience and I see that there's a group of people around it who are like-minded and I can interact with. And as a community, I come in and have this experience with them. That's going to change my mind about whether I want to do something or spend money on something. And I think that that's where Experiential has really kind of is ready to take off, has a chance to really take off by the more we push our clients to this realization that, like Harley Davidson, like what is more impactful to a Harley guy?
Yeah.
Some kind of experience that he can do because he's already considers himself a Harley person.
Yeah.
Or a television spot, or
Absolutely.
somebody who's wondering whether they should buy a Harley. Here's a group I can join, or here's this group experience that I can have with the brand, or a TV spot. You're always, if you can get like a guy who rides a Honda and get him to come to a Harley event and see the passion and the community around it, that's going to be the most powerful selling tool.
I think that the biggest issue, and I'm curious to get your take on this, as to why we're not using experiential more, is because it's hard to measure, or not hard, but the measurement is wrong, right? It's typically how much did it cost to do this thing divided by how many people came through it. And that is, I think, just wrong-headed, and it doesn't make sense. But when you do the math that way, it's like, well, this didn't make any sense. But if you add those additional layers like we're talking about, like okay, we're going to do this Harley event. And it's funny that you mentioned Harley, because I did an RFP for them a few years ago. That was pretty cool. And we didn't win. But when you do the thing, the event, the experience, and then you create content at that maybe gets turned into a TV spot or a content series or whatever, now you're kind of adding much more reach, and it's different. It feels different. It's not just, a 2D kind of thing on your screen. It's like, whoa, I can see what these people experience, and maybe there's testimonials, and maybe there's like, footage of the POV of somebody riding a bike. I don't know. But when you look at it that way and you measure it that way, now it becomes, better. But typically people aren't thinking that far ahead.
Yeah, and I think it also kind of comes down to if you buy my take that it's about community. Well, communities are like sort of living, breathing organisms, and you have to nurture them. It can't just be about the big hit. It just can't be about, we're going to dump a bunch of money, do this big thing, and hope that somehow magically grows into something. It has to be nurtured all along, that, there's the leading into it and generating awareness and getting interest, and then getting people involved and having some kind of, not just you experience it, but there's some sort of, I've taken a step to be part of this, that whether it's, an email address or sharing it somehow on social, or doing some, or giving an interview that can be used as a testimonial online in a video, however it is. And then yes, having a really smart plan to seed it out afterwards and to keep people engaged. And so if you're not, you don't want to just, one of the things we do at Encore is we do have a lot of like association clients, and it's really trying to make them understand, like, hey, like, we're not going to, you don't want to just have your people come, and you don't want to only be part of their life and relevant one time a year for a couple days. You want to be relevant to them all along, and you want to show your value to them all along, all throughout the year, because otherwise, why am I spending all this money on my dues just to go to this one thing once a year?
Right.
You need to have value throughout the year, and that's and I think that's part of the issue. And I don't know that anybody has really cracked that yet as to how to, the most effective ways to, because it's another expense, right? You do a big event, and
Yeah.
then you do a big activation, but then you also have to have all the support around it. But I think that's going to be, I think, the best way to measure sort of effectiveness is how effective is it at keeping people involved throughout the year. Then you have to figure out, well, what's a reasonable level of involvement, and
Yeah.
the,
So more measuring
yeah.
it more in terms of
Yeah.
terms of the engagement, the long term engagement. So let me ask you this question: is what's it going to take to get to this vision that both you and I seem to be kind of sharing, right? In my opinion, what the first step is like having a seat at the table, at the bigger table, right? So when we're talking about planning for next year, that experiential has a seat at that table, right? And it's not, again, we're a channel. We're like, oh, we'll think about that later. It's like we have a seat at the table. But are there other things that you think can help us make this shift that you're talking about?
Well, I guess if we're talking about strictly from what's going to benefit us as the agency, us as the creatives, maybe we need to be, and this coming just off the top of my head, but maybe we need to be more proactive about when we do events. If there's a way, because obviously there's client issues and everything, but like we have access to these clients or these, call them community members, consumers, whatever you want to call them, who come through these these experiences. So we have access to them. What is it like? What are we learning? Why are they coming to these? And like, what are we learning? And is there something that's unique and different? That what is it about their passion for this brand or this service or this association or whoever it is? What is it that's making them come? And what is it? What can we find that's unique? What's what's the little nugget of data that we can pull out that nobody else has access to? And because what we've had, you can call up tons of people and have them take surveys, but like until they actually, the feet hit the pavement and they actually go to an experience and participate in it, that's their time. That's their, time and effort. Why did they invest that in this? And if we can figure that out, then, we just moved a whole bunch of people and got them to do something. But what was it? And if, are those insights better, different, more unique than what anybody else is bringing to the table? And maybe we have a unique insight into these people, and how can we pull that out and use it to our advantage to show that, like, hey, we know these people as well, if not better, than anyone else.
Wow. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's interesting. All right, so we've come to that time in the program where it's time to pay off the title of the show, Confessions of a Creative Director. Mike Potter, what is your creative director confession, if you have one?
When I first started in the business at Young and Rubicam, it was at a building, 285 Madison Avenue. Giant building. They had the whole thing.
Madison Avenue.
Big
wow.
behemoth. Yeah, big behemoth. Yeah, it was. Yeah, but it was. So I'm old, and it was back in the day. They used to have actual interoffice mail. So there would be like a bin, and you would walk by, and they had the interoffice mail envelopes that you would. They had like the little string, and you put something in, and then you.
Yeah, I remember those. Yeah.
It had all these like places that you would write in who was going to. So you'd write in, and then once you received it, you crossed out the last person it went to, and you could write in who it was going to. So I used to, so I would every day have a banana. And so I don't know, for some reason I decided, it'd be funny to send this one guy the banana peel in the interoffice mail. So I stuck it in the interoffice mail. And he got it, and it was mystery, and I realized that it was kind of like there was no way for them to figure out that I was doing it because, I wouldn't drop it in my own floor or even near my desk. I would go to another floor and drop it off, and so I was, essentially doing it to people for like a number of months, and then it got to the point where they were sending out like memos asking people not to abuse the interoffice mail system. So, but how's that for a confession? That's pretty good.
I love that. I love that. I love, and I think there's, while I love working from home, I hope that we get back to going in a couple days a week for that kind of hijinks, right? And just pranks and
Yeah,
things. I remember a guy taped a banana. That's funny you mentioned the banana. Maybe it's a creative director thing. Taped a banana to the underside of my desk, and I was like, "What is that smell?" And I couldn't find it for months and months. And I finally found this
that's
rotten banana.
excellent.
So I miss the office hijinks. So maybe we'll
Yeah,
get back to that. But that's a
and
good one. I like that.
I'm completely aware that I did say earlier that it made me mad when account people thought creatives were goofs. So I've just completely
It comes
ruined
full
my own
circle.
arguments. So
No. We are goofs, and that's okay. I think we need
you
all
can still be
different
smart
types.
and goofy.
That's right. You can
Yeah.
if you take away nothing from this podcast episode, it's that. It's because you can still be smart and goofy. Well, Mike, thank you for being on
Exactly.
the show. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah, it was awesome. I wish you well in this endeavor, in this joint endeavor that both I think you and I share to kind of bring what we do to the forefront and make it a bigger part of the marketing mix. And I wish you guys continued success. And I'm sure we'll be in touch. And thanks again for being on the show.
Definitely.
All
You're
right, man.
welcome. Thank you so much, and same right back to you.
All right. We'll talk to you
Okay.
soon.
And there you have it, folks. Another episode of Confessions of a Creative Director in the books, thanks to my very special guest, Mike Potter from Encore. Man, that was a great show. I want to thank Mike for sharing his wisdom, his thoughts about going beyond the TV spots, and just reminding us about the fun that can be had in the office. So I don't know if I'm quite ready to go back full time, but it definitely would be fun to come into the office and put a banana in the inner office mail, although that doesn't exist anymore. So I'll have to figure something else out. Maybe something having to do with email. I don't know. But anyway, thanks for tuning in. Please subscribe to the show on YouTube, anywhere you get your podcasts. Let's help build this podcast up further this year. Tell your friends about it. If you have any creative friends who work at agencies or brands, let them know about the show. And let's keep building this thing up. Please pick up a copy of my book, What's the Big Idea? An Indispensable Guide to Becoming a Kick-Ass Creative Director. And let's have a happy and successful 2023. So until next time, peace, love, and creativity. See ya.